Good morning, friends. We'd like to start our program now. I'm Dr. Timothy Lynch, the president of the College of Staten Island, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning to our beautiful Willowbrook campus. I also bring greetings and welcome on part of our Chancellor of the City University of New York, Dr. Felix Matos Rodriguez, who was unable to join us this morning due to a late-breaking appointment, but who wishes he could be here in person and who is certainly here with us in spirit. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome you to the College of Staten Island as we come together today to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook Consent Decree, a landmark moment in our nation's history and a pivotal turning point in the fight for rights and dignity of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This anniversary is deeply meaningful to us here at the college. Our campus stands on the very grounds of the former Willowbrook State School, a place once marked by suffering, but now transformed into a center of learning, advocacy, and progress. To gather here today on this spot is to remember the past, to honor the present, and to commit ourselves to a better future. We are joined today by many distinguished guests whose work, leadership, and advocacy have shaped and continue to shape the disability rights movement. Kim Hill Ridley, New York State's Chief Disability Officer, advancing accessibility and systemic change statewide. Acting Commissioner of the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, Willow Baer, a steadfast partner in ensuring opportunity and support. Erik Geizer, Chief Executive Officer of the ARC New York, stewarding one of the most impactful disability advocacy organizations in the entire country. Jose Rivera, Chief Communications Officer at CP Nassau and a passionate family advocate. Laura Kennedy, President of the ARC of the United States, along with her husband Henry Kennedy, whose tireless legal work helped to secure the rights of countless individuals and families. Mr. Geraldo Rivera, whose landmark reporting exposed the truth of Willowbrook to the world. Bernard Carabello, whose voice helped ignite a movement from within the institution itself. Willie Mae Goodman, whose relentless advocacy for her daughter's dignity and freedom remains a guiding light. Diane Buglioli, a true community leader and lifelong advocate for inclusive services. We're also honored to recognize our panelists and contributors today. Clarence Sunram, a longtime legal advocate and former Willowbrook attorney. Beth Harulis, lead counsel in the Willowbrook class action litigation. BJ Stasio, former president of the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, panel moderator and co-host of OPWDD's Accessing Life podcast. Chester Finn, self-advocate and co-host of Accessing Life. And Jason Haar, chair of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council and a passionate advocate for community inclusion. I would also like to thank the committee that planned this event over the past several weeks. Henry and Laura Kennedy, Diane Buglioli, Jose Rivera, and representatives from the New York State Chief Disability Office, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, the ARC New York, the Council on Developmental Disabilities, and the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Committee. And of course, a very special thank you to Richard Salinardi of Lifestyles for the Disabled, Jackie Scarcella of A Very Special Place, and John Bellotti of On Your Mark for generously providing the food for today's gathering. Their respective work demonstrates what can be done when we encourage and provide the support for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to achieve their highest level of independence in the community. Lastly, I'd like to thank our team from the College of Staten Island and our partners at the City University of New York for their support today. It is now my distinct pleasure to recognize a very special guest from Governor Cathy Hochul's office. While the governor was not able to be here in person due to the late budget process, we know she is here in spirit. And we could not be more delighted that New York's first Chief Disability Officer, Kim Hill Ridley, is here to join us. Kim has been such a champion for disability rights and disability services in the governor's office since her appointment in February of 2022. In this role, Kim advises the governor and executive staff on policy and budgetary issues, as they pertain to disability issues, serving as the state's American with Disability Act coordinator and chairing New York's Most Integrated Services Coordinating Council, which is responsible for the state's Olmstead compliance. Welcome, Kim.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to such a fantastic event. Good morning, and thank you, President Lynch, for that amazing introduction. It is such an honor to be here today on behalf of Governor Hochul to recognize this historic day. As President Lynch said, I am New York's first ever Chief Disability Officer, a position I have the privilege of holding largely in thanks to tireless advocacy of so many of you here today who refuse to accept anything less than equality and inclusion for people with disabilities. And the state of New York's Chief Disability Office is a testament to New York and Governor Hochul's commitment to making sure that the voices of people with disabilities are heard and valued across the state. Thank you for joining us here today. Those of you know firsthand that this has not always been the case. You have lived through the evolution of inclusion, and we are so grateful for your advocacy and that you are able to join us here today to mark the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook Consent Decree. So thank you to all the advocates here today, including self-advocates like Bernard Carabello, who you'll hear from soon, and family advocates like Mrs. Goodman, who has very quickly become one of my favorite people in all of the state. Your voices are so important. I very much want to thank my boss, Peter Hatch, my husband, Mike Ridley, and a good portion of my team who are here today. Without all of you, I would not be here, and your support and tireless work every day does not go unnoticed. I also want to thank Governor Hochul for placing her trust in me to give this voice to New Yorkers with disabilities. It is and has been the honor of my life. Time and again, Governor Hochul has fought to make sure that the state budget supports the needs of people with disabilities, and she has worked tirelessly with lawmakers to enact legislation that empowers people with disabilities to live life on their own terms. Thanks to her commitment and advocacy, her executive budget includes funding to renovate Building 29 and transform it into the Willowbrook Center for Learning, commemorating its role in disability rights history right here in New York. Now more than ever, we will not let anyone, and I mean anyone, forget or erase the history of Willowbrook. And I am proud to say that under her leadership, New York has become a national leader for people with disabilities. Just last year, Governor Hochul signed Executive Order 40, committing New York State to be an employment-first state to increase competitive and integrated employment for New Yorkers with disabilities. This is just one of many of the governor's efforts to promote inclusivity for people with disabilities. I also want to thank the legislators here today, especially, I know I saw him somewhere, my good friend Michael Cusick, who I used to work for back in the Assembly. Oh, there you are. Can't see anything with the lights. You all have had there's been no doubt in the life-changing measures that you have taken to improve the lives of people with disabilities, and we are so thankful for your partnership. I would also like to recognize the journalists who opened our eyes to shine a light on the atrocities of Willowbrook, Geraldo, Rivera, and Jane Curtin. You did what great journalism does. You helped bring local and national attention to grave injustices. While the history of Willowbrook is painful, it reminds me of why I'm proud to be a New Yorker and why I'm proud to be the Chief Disability Officer. Throughout history, New Yorkers have repeatedly fought to right systemic wrongs and to empower the disempowerment. From the Seneca Falls Convention to school boycotts in New York City, to the Stonewall riots, the Willowbrook Consent Decree is yet another example of the power of advocacy and especially self-advocacy. When the world's eyes were opened to the horrifying accounts of abuse and neglect, the residents of Willowbrook and their families used their voices to demand change. That is how 50 years ago, Willowbrook became the birthplace of deinstitutionalization, with the signing of the Willowbrook consent decree, sparking the national disability rights movement and forever changing the way that people see and treat people with disabilities. It marked the beginning of a new era for people with disabilities. In just 50 years, we have transformed from a system of institutionalization to a state where people with disabilities live, work, and thrive in our communities. But all of us here today know that our work is not done. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to make New York the most inclusive place for people with disabilities. At this time, I would like to ask our MC, College of Staten Island President Tim Flynn, to come back to the podium. So, President Flynn, I would like to present the College of Staten Island with a special citation from Governor Hochul, recognizing, yes, please. So the citation recognizes the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook consent judgment and decree. I hope that this will become a valued piece of your extensive Willowbrook archives.
It certainly will. Thank you. And thank you for the government.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Why, thank you, Kim. We appreciate all that you and the governor have done to move forward issues that are important to those with developmental disabilities and their families. Now I would like to bring to the stage someone that many of you in this audience already know. OPWDD's current acting commissioner, Willow Baer, previously served as OPWDD's executive deputy commissioner and counsel. And she's also served as assistant counsel to Governor Hochul across the fields of human services and mental hygiene. The acting commissioner has spent her entire career working to protect and advocate for underrepresented populations and continues that work in partnership with service providers and other partners to ensure that New York is a state that is inclusive, supportive, and one in which people with developmental disabilities live with meaningful choice and are proud to call home. Hello?
Thank you. Good morning. Are we celebrating today? Good morning. That was better. Thank you for being here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook consent decree. It is honestly an event that triggered the way that we see people with developmental disabilities, that we treat people with developmental disabilities, and include people with developmental disabilities into our lives and into our communities. I want to thank the College of Staten Island, the event planning committee, and my communications team for pulling together this incredible event and this tremendous group of people. The history in this room is overwhelming to me. I think I'm the only person that wasn't here at the 25th celebration. So I've had so many incredible conversations with you all this morning, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of today. To say that this is a momentous occasion would be an understatement. The decades of advocacy and progress made by and for people with developmental disabilities and their families have taken the system from one of deplorable institutionalization, like you may have driven past on your way in today, to one that we strive to make people proud to call home. Now, there are a lot of people to thank, and I'm speaking third, which means you've probably already heard most of what I'm going to say, but bear with me because there are people that really deserve the acknowledgement. First, I want to call out what an absolute champion our 57th governor has been to people with disabilities. Governor, you may applaud. Governor Hochul has proven through action her commitment to people with developmental disabilities with 4 consecutive cost of living increases for our nonprofit provider community, as well as the recent historic $850 million investment to make up for years of underfunding for these service providers. In this soon-to-be enacted budget, she continues her investment to people with IDD, with the largest ever investment in OPWDD's Institute for Basic Research here in Staten Island. A $75 million capital improvement plan will allow upgrades throughout the campus and the creation of a new genomics lab to better identify how genetics play a role in people's diagnoses and how we can provide better health care and supports. And of course, the creation of the Willowbrook Center for Learning, which will renovate Building 29, forever preserving Willowbrook's history and display rich archives and artifacts for future generations. This is an investment not only in recognition of people with disabilities and the hard-fought battles that many have persevered, but it is also an investment in Staten Island. And perhaps the most important investment that the governor has made was her appointment of Kim Hill Ridley, the state's first chief disability officer who you just heard from. Kim is an incredible champion and a wonderful partner to OPWDD, and we're so pleased that she was able to join us today. We are also grateful to our elected officials and members of the legislature that are here or have supported us through representation. We thank you for your support of the cost of living increases and of legislation like supported decision-making and many other bills that have helped increase independence and dignity for New Yorkers with developmental disabilities. We are also excited to welcome renowned journalist Geraldo Rivera. I'm geeking out a little bit about Geraldo being here, I have to admit. He will be here a little later to talk about his experience with Willowbrook and his now infamous reporting in the early 1970s, which led to a national movement, as you know, forever changing the way people with disabilities are treated. It really led us all to where we are here today. People with and without disabilities getting together to talk about our history, what we can learn from it, what we can learn from our present, and how we can do better together as we go forward. A special thank you to Tawny Ferguson and the members of the Willowbrook Consumer Advisory Board. Where are you, Tawny? Yay! Thank you for all that you do to hold us accountable each and every day for the last 50 years to ensure the highest level of inclusion and quality of support. The Willowbrook Advisory Board provides lifelong representation and advocacy for Willowbrook class members, and really for everyone in the state of New York with a developmental disability. It's a job that's not easy, and we don't always agree, but we do appreciate you and what you bring to the system, truly. Thank you also to our partners at the Council on Developmental Disabilities. I am so grateful to Kristin Proud for her executive leadership now in a time when it feels like it is needed more than ever. So thank you, Kristin, for all of your support. Where are you? I've been watching The Crown, and now I catch myself waving like this. 2 years ago, the council produced the New York Emmy Award-winning documentary, The Path Forward, Remembering Willowbrook, which highlights the story of Willowbrook, told by key players, many of you who are in this room today, of the lessons learned and positive change that resulted. We will watch a trailer of that powerful film in just a little bit. We will also hear from a panel of experts today on their thoughts about the future for community inclusion and what we continue to learn from our past and even from our present. It is hard to imagine a world where a place like Willowbrook existed. That is a past that is painful, that is a past that is shameful, but the people who demanded change and decency and respect for every person and the upward momentum of that social justice movement is the good that was born out of those dark times. Advocacy is the reason all of us are here. Speaking of which, we are blessed to be joined by two of New York's fiercest advocates today. As my one contribution to this event, I decided it was high time to publicly acknowledge two of the original trailblazers for being a true catalyst for change. The first of those awards recognizes the unwavering tenacity, fierce spirit, and love that only a family member can bring. Someone who tirelessly serves as their loved one's advocate, but also challenges all of the rest of us to see the potential and value of all people with disabilities. Someone who calls my office multiple times a week to remind me that nobody is a nobody. Today, we are so proud to honor Mrs. Willie Mae Goodman with the inaugural Willie Mae Goodman Family Advocacy Award. She is a personal hero to me, and I would not make it through giving her award, so I'm going to ask Jose Rivera, another family advocate and lifelong friend to Mrs. Goodman, to join her on stage. She just said, "I couldn't hear what you said," and I assured her it was nice.
I'm going to say a few words. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I am honored because in this room and on these grounds, there's a lot of history. In this room, there are a lot of historical figures. I am honored to be standing alongside one of those historical figures of Miss Goodman. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about her, just so that it gives you some context about the woman we are recognizing today with the first award named after her. So certainly, thank you so much, Commissioner Baer, for that acknowledgement. Miss Goodman is a native of Durham, North Carolina, where she was born and raised, moved to New York, and in 1955 had a daughter by the name of Margaret Goodman. I trust Margaret is here. Margaret Goodman is what gave Goody her purpose. It gave Goody a direction and a path that she hadn't expected. Margaret was born profoundly disabled, and in the 1960s found herself being placed in Willowbrook State School, much like my brother was, because families were in need of services. And Willowbrook State School was the place that families were told those services would be provided. Needless to say, that was not accurate. Margaret spent numerous years there, and in the 1960s, the state of New York, in anticipation of what was converging the issues with the overcrowded conditions, selected about 200 of its most profoundly disabled individuals, children at the time, and moved them quietly, unbeknownst to the families, to a building that had been abandoned by the city of New York, formerly Goodman Hospital, and that building was boarded up and reopened. The calculation on the part of the state officials for the Department of Mental Hygiene at the time was that these 200 or so very profoundly disabled individuals had a short life expectancy. And so the calculation was a building that had been abandoned that should never have been rehoused to occupy anybody. The chances are they wouldn't live that long before people began to realize the potential dangers and hazards that Goodman presented. But God had other purposes in mind for those 200 individuals, those souls that were selected. The families that followed them, like Miss Goodman and like my parents, got together, especially when we became aware that in the 1970s, the Department of Mental Hygiene faced budget cuts, and now realized that the Goodman population had lived longer than what they needed to. And the hazards of the building were being known. Were becoming known. So that was a bad combination and a risk that the Department of Mental Hygiene could not afford to continue to put up with. And so the thought was, with the budget cuts that the state was facing at the time, let's move these guys, the 200 or so individuals from Goodman, back to Willowbrook State School. So families got together in a conference room up on the 5th floor of Goodman, and we discussed the letter we had just gotten from Dr. Hammond, who basically said, due to budget cuts, I'm sorry to say, but your child has to be returned back to Willowbrook. The choice you have is either allow for the child to be returned to Willowbrook, or you can take your child back home with you. That's the same plain language that was in that letter. Very cold-hearted, very insensitive, because if families had an opportunity to keep their child at home, believe you me, we would have kept my brother. Margaret would have stayed home. So that wasn't a realistic choice. But that's what we were told. We got together as families and decided we weren't going to allow New York State to take our kids back to Willowbrook when we knew the dangers that Willowbrook presented. And at that time, God sent us a gentleman who came into Goodman by the name of Murray Schneps. Murray, a lawyer, a parent of a child with disability as well, had skin in the game and knew exactly what we were dealing with when we talked about Willowbrook, knew exactly what the shortcomings were of the system that was not set up to meet the needs of people with developmental disabilities at the time. And Murray got together with Ms. Goodman and the parents and filed the first lawsuit in 1971, June of 1971, in the case Goodman versus the Supreme Court of New York, and was able to successfully achieve a court injunction to be able to prevent the state of New York from returning these individuals back to Willowbrook. That was the first lawsuit, first case won by a parent that served as precedent setting for what then occurred the following year with the next filing, the class action lawsuit, the Willowbrook class action lawsuit that was filed by families as a result of the conditions that occurred in Willowbrook at the time. So Ms. Goodman is a trailblazer in that regard. She helped set in motion what was now going to be the template on how to proceed with court litigation against the bureaucracy like Department of Mental Hygiene. We succeeded to continue fighting for our individuals and denied them being returned back to Willowbrook State School. But more importantly, we insisted that our individuals get the care that they needed, the care that they were promised, the care that they deserved. And as a result of that, we organized, and Ms. Goodman became the president of the Goodman Parents Association. I suddenly was wrapped into that because I needed to assist my mother with translating what was being done by the parent group. And then I got roped into Ms. Goodman, who pulled me into her wing and made me her adopted son. By the way, she has many sons, but I always say I'm the first. I'm the first that was adopted by her. And together we fought. Together we fought, and together we continue to fight for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are some phrases that Ms. Goodman has coined in her advocacy efforts in her years of fighting, 50 plus years. Phrases like, first they are human, then they're disabled, is a phrase she's used over her lifetime. Another phrase is, first you fight for yours, and then you fight for all. It's another phrase that Ms. Goodman coined. Recent phrase that she's coined is, it's about the people first, and then paper. It's important to understand what's behind some of those phrases, because they speak to a history that she's faced and a struggle that she's faced. So as we prepare to celebrate and acknowledge Ms. Goodman for her years of advocacy, by the way, Ms. Goodman is going to be 94 years old, God willing, on Mother's Day. So, Willie Mae, on behalf of all your years of advocacy, on behalf of OPWDD, I'm going to present you with the first Willie Mae Goodman Family Advocacy Award.
It's the paparazzi.
Okay.
Your turn.
Yeah, I got to say something?
Yep.
I don't want to sit down.
She doesn't want to sit down. She's still feisty.
Now bring it down. I never thought that I would be getting an award from OPWDD. But on the behalf of all the kids who else, can you hear me? Hello? Oh, I better put this back on.
Come over here, Goody. They can't see you.
Okay.
Come, stand over here. Stand over here.
I don't want to sit down.
No, stand. Just stand.
They want to see your face.
Oh, my face?
Your
Yes.
face.
Now,
Like I said before, I didn't have no idea that OPWDD be giving me an award. But anyway, I thank you on the behalf of all of the kids who has a disability and those who are not children has a disability. All of us has a disability. None of us are perfect, not at all. But I want to say that I have a saying, everybody is somebody. There's not one person that is a nobody. All of our kids are somebody. And I always tell people, look at them first as being a person first, a human being, and an angel of the Lord. These kids are angels. They did not ask to be born this way. They didn't ask to live this way. And it's up to all of us, to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. OPWDD has an obligation and a responsibility to take care of them. Parents has an obligation and a responsibility to make sure that OPWDD take care of our individuals and not look at them as being paper first and people second. They are people first, and paper you put it wherever you want to put it. God loves each and every one of us, regardless of creed or religion, regardless of preference of all. We are the children of the Lord. They told me when Marguerite was 4 months old that she wouldn't live to get 2. She's 69 years old. And the children who came from Willowbrook to Goodman are in their 60s and 70s. And that is a blessing. It's a blessing of the Lord. But it's also the blessing that God had given you who taking care of the kids, the blessing too. But remember, I hear people say, oh, I'm taking care of her. They taking care of you too, you know that. In a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. God is good. But I always want to tell this to you. The leader of all of us was Murray B. Snaps, who was our lawyer, who fought for each and every one of us. We wouldn't be here, and our children would not be here if it wasn't for Murray B. Snaps. He took us to court. We wouldn't have never been able to go to court if we didn't have a good lawyer to speak out on our behalf. Murray was the leader. He taught us to lead. He taught us to fight. He told us to speak out on the behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves. I remember Murray and I going to a meeting, which they didn't want us there. He turned around and he said, he always called me, Goody, my darling. First we fight for ours, and then we fight for all. We got to fight for each and every one of us who cannot help themselves. We got to have good leaders. But first of all, we got to have God. Second, people who work for the system got to look at the individual as being a person first, and not a nobody. Everybody is a somebody. God is good. Each day we wake up, we should thank the Lord. Those who wake up in the morning is healthy, And you should pray for those who cannot speak for themselves. We must give them that voice. And the voice comes from us. The voice comes from the people who work with the individual. The voice comes from the parents. The voice comes from the politicians. Because they don't have a voice. We have to give them that voice. We're going to have to walk and talk for them. Without our voice, who are they? Out of sight, out of mind. In sight, we have a mind. Thank you and God bless you. On behalf of all the kids and all of those who take care of our kids day and night and day. They are their parents. We're not there with them all the time. We have to depend on them, and they have to depend on us to be their voice. And we got to have a good commissioner who listens, who understands, and be patient, and help us carry that voice out. Thank you, and God bless. I'm going to kill you.
You're going to kill me? I don't know how to take the last comment, but I'm going to let it go. I'm going to talk to her about that on the break. Our second award recognizes a self-advocate who embodies the determination for community inclusion for all people with developmental disabilities, someone who is not afraid to use his voice to speak truth to power. Bernard Carabello, Self-Advocacy Award. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
You don't need a name tag.
I am Cathy Loquercio. I'm the co-vice president of the Staten Statewide Board. Today we honored Bernard Carabello, who sounded the alarm to let everyone know that Willowbrook was not the place for people we loved and respect like they should have been as grew up. I know Bernard Carabello for 20 years. When I first started Sandy's, that's how I met Bernard. And he was true an advocate for people with the disabilities. Sandy's is proud to had Bernard as a foundation. He knows the people with disabilities need a place to make their own voices heard, but things that of your lives. We all know Willowbrook was the time there people with mental disabilities through of us less than. Bernard actually lives there day by day, seeing the classmates not getting choices, anything for themselves or but themselves. He is an advocate that open the door and let TV cameras in Rivera come into Willowbrook. witness what has been going on. Bernard took the risk one day and let people with disabilities or forever better for it. People with disabilities in New York State now shall have him thanking to start the movement of community to has day. Bernard is a part of Commissioner Fox's works on Willowbrook. He has earned several awards, including an honor degree from the College of Staten Island. He is a Dr. Carabello to you and me.
Don't forget.
We never forget that. Bernard is a proud of all of you and accept for people with disabilities. Congratulations for all, whatever you gotten. Thank you. This one? This is for you. You got everything set? Come on.
Let's take a picture first.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
You're up.
You up. You can move up a little bit.
Cathy, I can take care of that.
Okay.
Is that okay? I'm okay.
You okay?
I'm back. This was my home for 18 years. I had the good times and I had the bad times. But Willowbrook will always be a part of my life. There's nothing I can do to escape it. I don't want to. I'm proud for what I did over the years. And let me say thank you to those direct care people that took care of me. We have good people and we have not so good people. But I still say, and I'm gonna say this to the day I die, the direct care people are grossly underpaid. They are working with important people. That means so much to the parents that could not take care of us. I was just yeah. When I left Willowbrook, it was the most scary time in my life because I've been around people with physical and developmental disability. When I left, Willowbrook. It was a whole different world out there. And I had to get over the fact that people were going to laugh at me as I walk, talk, or whatever. But you know what? It took me weeks to overcome that. And I overcame it fast. Because I realized people needed to be educated about people with physical and developmental disability. So we're no longer in the closet anymore. I gotta remind you all that work for OPWDD. You got the best damn commissioner. And she paid me to say that. I love her. I do. She's the next generation that's going to help people and educate people about people with physical and developmental disability. I'm proud of what I did, and if I had to do it again, I would. Thank you all. And
It's a tough act to follow. Bear with me, please. I can't think of anyone more deserving of recognition than Willie, May, and Bernard. They are icons in the developmental disabilities movement. Thank you both for your years of advocacy. We have some special guests here today that I'd like to acknowledge. Representatives, of course, from Governor Cathy Hochul's office, as well as representatives from State Senator Andrew Lanza, State Senator and CSI alum Jessica Scarcella-Spanton are here in the audience today. Maybe you can just wave and be acknowledged. There you are. Good to see you, Nick. Representatives from New York State Assemblyman Sam Pirazzolo's office. Pardon me, Nick Robbins. Good to see you, Nick. We also have our friends from the City Council, David Carr, newly elected Frank Morano. Frank, good to see you. And representatives from City Council person Camilla Hanks, Mike Arvanitis. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Judge Erik Vitagliano, Eastern District of New York, retired, and of Mr. Robert Rodriguez, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. Good to see Robert. I would like to call someone who's well known to Staten Islanders. Although he may not be in the legislature anymore, his many years of service to the Staten Island community still benefits all of us, and he continues to be a strong voice for our community and in this community. It's former Assemblyman and my friend, Michael Cusick. Mike?
Thanks, Tim. Okay. If Tim was truly my friend, he would not have me follow Bernard, but thank you, Tim. And let's hear it for Tim Lynch and the folks here at the College of Staten Island for the great job that they do here every day. And the college is a symbol of what we are celebrating today, the 50 years of the Willowbrook consent decree. This college sits right where Willowbrook State School was, right? And I'd just like to acknowledge, I know he was acknowledged, but former Assemblyman Erik Vitaliano and Assemblywoman Betty Conley, John Markey, and the titans that came before many of us here who were legislators or are legislators or representatives of legislators, those titans are the ones who then moved the ball forward after the consent decree went into effect. And that was very important because the decree, being a document, needed to be implemented 10 years from then, 20 years, and now we're at 50 years. And as many of my friends who I served with, and I say served with, they were not elected representatives, but they were representatives of the disabilities community who would go up to Albany, lobby us in Albany, still continue to do that, and hold elected officials and commissioners accountable. They continue that work. Because I see the consent decree, yes, we celebrate the 50 years of it, but it's still a living document. We still have to protect and move forward in protecting our family, our friends, our neighbors with developmental disabilities. We have to remind people every day of the atrocities that took place at Willowbrook. And it's the many people in this room, and this feels like a reunion. I'm so happy I was invited to be here because there's so many people in this room who have dedicated their life to make sure that we follow that decree, that we follow the work of the two advocates who just spoke, their dedication to make sure that that school was closed, but also that we move forward. And that people with developmental disabilities are given the dignity that they deserve. This is about inclusion. That's the name of this program today, the evolution of inclusion. I know every single person in this room lives that to make sure that that is reality, that there is always inclusion when it comes to people with developmental disabilities. And that's what this day is about. We do celebrate the 50 years, but we celebrate the present day, the work that has been done to continue that goal, but the future, what the future holds, the prospects out there to really improve the quality of life of all of our citizens, every single one of our citizens in the state of New York. So I'd like to thank the governor, and I'd like to thank Commissioner Baer and my good friend, Kim Hill Ridley. Don't let her fool you. She said she worked for me. I worked for her. I think, the folks here know that. Her husband knows that. I worked for her. But the work that they do on the state level to work with the community is what we need here in Staten Island, but throughout the state of New York and this great country. Thank you so much. I look forward to the program.
Thank you, Mike. I'd now like to invite the ARC New York CEO, Erik Geizer, to the stage. It is my great pleasure to announce a momentous addition to the College of Staten Island's Willowbrook Legacy Project. For the past 70 years, the ARC New York has curated one of the most extensive and significant collections documenting the intellectual and developmental disabilities movement in this country. Their archive preserves the legacy of family advocates, policy reform, legal battles, and the evolution from institutionalization to community life. This collection includes correspondence, photographs, legal records, videos, periodicals, and advocacy materials, offering an unparalleled view into both the history and the ongoing work of social justice and disability rights. And today, the ARC New York is officially entrusting that collection to the College of Staten Island. This partnership will allow us to preserve, catalog, and make these invaluable materials available to the public and to researchers for generations to come. As a historian, I'm particularly excited about this project. It is a deeply meaningful gesture, connecting past and present advocacy in education, memory, and mission. Erik, we thank you for your vision, your leadership, and mostly for your trust.
Good morning, everyone. What a moving day it's been so far. I want to start by thanking Dr. Lynch for the warm introduction and his support and the college's support in making this day possible. It's really an honor to be here before all of you as we mark an amazing milestone in the history of the disability rights movement. A special thank you to the governor, who unfortunately couldn't be here, our distinguished guests, but mostly all of you. You are our disability champions, and thank you. Your dedication to advancing the rights and dignity of people with disabilities is truly inspiring to me. Thank you for joining us today as we renew our commitment to preserving history and promoting progress. Now, as Dr. Lynch mentioned, today is a particularly meaningful day for the ARC New York. As many of you know, our organization and its families were plaintiffs in the landmark lawsuit that resulted in the consent decree and the closure of the infamous Willowbrook State School. To commemorate today's milestone, we are thrilled to announce that we are transferring our historic archives collection to the College of Staten Island. This collection contains almost 75 years of original materials documenting the history of the disability rights movement, the power of advocacy, the transformation from institutionalization to community support, and the progress made since. The College of Staten Island is profoundly symbolic and appropriate home for this collection. This partnership will expand access to these important materials. They will be a vital resource to educate, to inspire, to empower future generations as we continue the work required to build a more inclusive world for all. We are also deeply grateful to the Staten Island Foundation, who committed generous grant funding to ensure that these important stories will live on and remain accessible. So thank you all for being a part of this historic movement and moment. We have more work to do, and we look forward to doing it together going forward. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to welcome to the stage Kristin Proud, Executive Director of the Council on Developmental Disabilities. Kristin oversees the development and implementation of the Council's state plan and ensures the Council fulfills its mandates under federal and state laws. Kristin?
Hello, everyone. It is an honor to be here at this event and to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook consent decree with all of you. You are the ones who make it happen every day, and many of you in this room are part of the group that made it happen in the first place and changed the face of the disability system in New York State for so many people and for people in generations to come. I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about our documentary, the Council on Developmental Disabilities documentary, Willowbrook, The Path Forward, and just give you a little bit of background on how it came into being. But before I do that, I want to just say a little bit about how important the work is that you all have done and continue to do. Whether you are a self-advocate, which is probably the most important role of all, right? Because we all deserve to have a voice and to be able to express ourselves and express our needs and express our preferences. Our parents and family members, siblings who are here to make sure that their loved ones have a voice and are seen and heard and have opportunities to maximize their abilities and not only focus on their disabilities. And to DSPs and members of provider organizations who day in and day out do the things that individuals need assistance with so they can live as inclusively as possible and really do the things that they want to do and focus on their abilities. My own brother was born in 1970. That was at a time when there weren't, as you well know, home and community-based services and other options for being in the community, learning in the community, living in the community. My parents were told to terminate his parental rights, forget they ever had him, and go home, and maybe they would be fortunate enough to have a normal child in the future. Thankfully, my parents had the wherewithal not to do that. Because my brother was profoundly physically and developmentally disabled, he needed a very high level of care, and he spent the few months that he was alive in a private, with a private organization in the Albany area that thankfully, and we're still grateful to this day for them, that they took exceptional care of him. But that wasn't the case for so many families and so many individuals, people like Willie Mae and her daughter Margaret and Bernard, who spent 18 years of his life. I couldn't imagine spending 18 years of my life in a place like Willowbrook. And it's because they had the courage to use their voices and to not give up. And it's incredible to see Willie Mae on the verge of her 94th birthday, and she's still advocating. So it's more important than ever with what is swirling around us that you are here today and that you continue to use your voices. First for yours, as Willie Mae said, and then for all, including those who aren't able to speak for themselves, but need all of us collectively to speak for them, to make sure that their needs are provided for, they continue to have opportunities to live their lives how they choose to live them and to be among others in the community. So I encourage you, and I think your presence here today is such a strong indication of your commitment to the advocacy, but our advocacy is needed more now than ever. So back to the Willowbrook documentary, and if you have not seen it, I hope that you will take the opportunity to stay at the end and see the full version if you have time. But we're going to show a short trailer with some of the highlights of it. You'll see a lot of familiar faces in it. But it really all started, as you know, in 1972 with then investigative reporter Geraldo Rivera and his, his perseverance in conducting a series of investigations into what were found to be absolutely deplorable conditions at Willowbrook. There were others, certainly local journalist Jane Curtin, who at the time was with the Staten Island Advance, whose investigations led to the eventual airing of an expose titled Willowbrook, The Last Great Disgrace. And so the expose revealed just these deplorable conditions of the individuals who were residing there. So to commemorate the 50th anniversary as it was approaching, the Council on Developmental Disabilities began to produce a series of short videos reflecting on that expose that was done all those years ago and the progress that has been made over the decades. The first interview was actually with Geraldo and with Bernard, and they offered insight into how they met 50 years ago and what became their lasting friendship that continues, as you know, to this day. And that essentially inspired, along with the opening of the Willowbrook Mile, the council to fund the creation of what has now become an Emmy Award-winning, I'm very proud to say that, documentary highlighting Willowbrook and what has come since. So it's entitled The Path Forward, Remembering Willowbrook. And I will now cue up the trailer so that you can all see the first 5 minutes. But again, if you haven't seen it, I do encourage you to watch it in its entirety. It's a little over 24 minutes long. You can also view it through the Council on Developmental Disabilities website if you're not able to stay to watch it at the end of this presentation. So thank you all again very much for your advocacy over the years, and thank you for the advocacy that I'm confident that you are going to continue to do so that people can maximize their abilities and live as inclusively as possible.
Visited the state institutions for the mentally retarded, and I think particularly at Willowbrook that we have a situation that borders on a snake pit, and that the children live in filth. I think all of us are at fault, and I think it's just it's long overdue that something be done about it.
How long have you been at Willowbrook?
18 years.
How is it living on the ward that you live?
Disgrace.
The attendants are trying their best, but the staff is just too small to do anything more than just try and keep the place clean. When there's only one person to take care of 30 or 40, nothing good can possibly happen. No rehabilitation, no training, nothing. The attendants are as much the victim of the conditions here as the patients are.
My problem with telling this story 50 years later is that I'm like Pavlov's dog. I react and I get flashed back to that, to the obscene, the torture of the residents, the inmates there. It was something so utterly terrible that it was almost unbelievable.
This was a secret enclave. The system had set up a way that would not allow any ordinary people to see what was going on inside these brick buildings.
I was given this key on that first day of work. Pretty heavy steel key, that you can see. I was told to go to a certain building, and I went there and I opened one door. It was a very heavy metal door. Turned the key, opened it, and I walked a couple of steps and I had to open a second door. I was directed down to the end of the hall. There was another steel door. At 19 years of age, I basically said to myself, what have I gotten myself into? Who is locked behind 3 steel doors? Pushed the door open, and when I walked in, on the other side of the door were 40 toddlers. And why in God's name were they locked behind 3 steel doors?
When I applied for my job, I was really never taken to any of the wards. They just accepted my application and they told me when I would start. And then I went to building 6, which was my building. And the building supervisor opened the door to the day room, and there was the chaos.
You have no idea what was inside, no idea the savagery, the squalor, the illness, the infectiousness, the violence that was just the norm every day.
It had a stink to it that got into your clothes and into your skin. How unattended, it was hell on earth.
Why would you continue to allow people to share a bathrooms with no doors on the stalls when you know 100% of them get hepatitis within 6 months of entering, and when the incidence of intestinal parasites and worms was incredibly high?
When I used to give out cookies and candy, I used to draw it on the floor, and they all get down and grab it. I mean, and I never told nobody that it happened. It happened.
Mind you, this is only 50 years ago. We're not talking about the dark ages. We are still responsible. We're not talking about great grandparents and, ancient history. This is our world, our universe. This happened in our universe on our watch. It's mind-blowing.
Powerful, powerful stuff there. And now I'm honored to introduce our special guest, someone who really needs no introduction. He is one of media's most enduring broadcasters with a long career of breaking major news stories, including raising public awareness of the terrible conditions at Willowbrook. Emmy and Peabody Award-winning journalist Geraldo Rivera has been breaking news, providing insightful commentary, and conducting revealing interviews for more than 5 decades. Geraldo, welcome back to the College of Staten Island.
All right, don't go off the stage. Take me with you. Thank you.
I did not do this.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. Delighted to be here. Very touching. Every time Bernard and I return to this property now so beautiful, always so beautiful, ironically. It brings back such emotion, such memories. But, in a sense, hey, partner, we're still here.
I know. 50 years ago.
50 years ago. It is amazing, and I really do feel in every regard that we are the living link to the grim old days, to the nightmare when everything was horrible and covered up. And Bernard uttered the one word that stuck, that really became part of the title of the first documentary. When I asked him, how are the conditions in building number 6? And you replied? 7, building 7. Thank you. My fact checker.
You gotta forgive me. He's 82 years old.
I came all this way to be insulted. So how do you, might as well ask, when people regard you, I wasn't the only one aging 50 years. You were right alongside me. How do you react when people see you?
I don't look my age.
Wait a second, I swear this is my real hair color.
Oh, yeah, right.
So, there was a feeling in the 1950s era that just the way they made Fords or Chevys on an assembly line, that's the way to care for people with disabilities. Way too cost intensive to do it any other way. You line them up, For instance, at feeding time, not mealtime, feeding time, and as the original documentary portrayed so graphically, the kind of porridge or, pudding was shoved in their mouths like baby birds taking a feeding from their mom, just shovel in 15 seconds per resident. In this, imagine that you're on the grounds of the world's largest institution for the developmentally disabled. Over 5,000, at some point it hit 6,000 in New York City. This existed in New York City. It wasn't some, Siberia. Wasn't some faraway place. It was New York City. And I think that the location had a lot to do with accelerating the public's outrage. What, here? Right around here? What? And it started a crusade, or accelerated a crusade, led primarily, initially at least, by the moms, by Vicki Schneps and her crowd, wonderful people at Life's Work. And then the other parents from around the state said, what about my kid? And I had no idea. Now everybody knows. Now nobody could say that they didn't know. Everybody knows now what the conditions were. And Bernard was a convenience. In a sense, easy to keep him undereducated when he had tremendous educational potential, as you can see. It takes more IQ to crack a joke than it does to make a speech. And he's constantly ribbing me. He has a wonderful, he's got a joie de vivre, he's got a joy of life that is
Keep going.
This is it's like a Laurel and Hardy. So, what to you is the biggest message to emerge?
But before you do that, I want to go back to the feeding part. You gotta remember, there was about 80 people on the wall, and you only have 2 to 3 staff taking care of all 80 people. It was impossible to do an adequate job. So the staff was more of a victim as well as the people.
The staff were as much victims as the residents.
Yes.
In many ways. Imagine going home after that, after a day of that toil. So, you didn't give me my word. Disgrace was the word.
Yes.
That was the conditions.
Yes.
And Willowbrook we called the last great disgrace.
Correct.
Because we couldn't believe that something this scale, a whole class of people, but what we celebrate today, and what New York and the other states really are pointing to, although living under the shadow, the fear that a bureaucrat in Washington might erase a grant and destroy a program. I'm sure you'll talk about that and the peril that exists to existing programs. But now the disabled, the whole idea is that everybody, to each his own for as much as he or she can be or do. The state owes every child, every person indeed, the chance for a dignified life where potential is realized, or at least the opportunity to have potential realized exists. Whether it's group homes or adult living, independent living facilities, I'm seeing them opening all across the country. where the parents get, because it's 24/7, the parents get a break sometimes, where humanity and pragmatism coincide. It is one of the joys of my life that Bernard and I have lived to see this. I mean, it really is wonderful. Did you like the one-to-one movie?
I did.
You look pretty good dancing around there.
Of course.
I think you had that same shirt on.
No.
So Bernard lives on his own, has tremendous help.
Can I just say something?
Your show, brother.
We did a lot over the years. Get people out of my institutions into the community.
Getting people out of the institutions into the community, yep.
Yeah, they're about to cut Medicaid. If they cut Medicaid, people are going to have to go back to the institution because Medicaid is paying to keep people in the community. So you need to write to your congressman and say, we don't want to cut that. We don't want to turn back the clock.
Couldn't that be the slogan? When you talk to your representative or lobby whoever, you don't want to turn back the clock. And you wonder and you worry with everything that's going on. With my old friend, the president, you wonder about what the intent is, his intent. Does he know? The people around him, do they know? Do they understand? Do they remember? We have to make them remember. Okay. You got anything else to say?
No.
You have lunch yet?
Not yet. You buy?
I always buy.
I know.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. Okay, on the back up. Don't go forward. Thank you very much. It's really been delightful. We obviously didn't script it. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here today, Geraldo, and for continuing to support full community inclusion for people with developmental disabilities. Next up is our panel discussion on the evolution of inclusion, and I'm going to invite our panelists and moderators out to take a seat. Our moderator, who joins us all the way from Buffalo, is no stranger to advocacy, having been actively involved in advocacy and leadership for over 20 years. BJ is a former president of the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State and co-host of OPWDD's Accessing Life podcast. BJ Stasio. Our panelists today include Erik Geizer. Erik is the Chief Executive Officer of the ARC New York, the largest nonprofit provider of supports and services for people with developmental disabilities in New York State. The family-led organization supports 60,000 people and employs 35,000 staff at 35 local chapters across the state. Beth Harulis. Beth handles a broad variety of civil rights and civil liberties issues, ranging from First Amendment issues to government surveillance issues to public health and disabilities issues. Working with New York Civil Liberties Union as co-counsel, Beth is lead counsel in the Willowbrook class action litigation. Henry Kennedy is a parent of a woman with developmental disabilities. He's also an attorney who has served on numerous boards and committees involving disabilities, including the Research Foundation Mental Hygiene Board and the Institute for Basic Research Governor's Blue Ribbon Panel. In 2000, he co-chaired the 25th anniversary celebration of the consent judgment held here at the College of Staten Island. Clarence Sundram is a nationally recognized expert on conditions in institutions and community programs for people with developmental disabilities. He served as a member of the Willowbrook Review Panel, federally appointed to monitor the implementation of the Willowbrook consent judgment. Jason Haar. Jason is the Associate Executive Director of On Your Mark Incorporated, one of today's caterers, and serves as the chair of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council. Jason has been involved with the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council for over 10 years and is a strong advocate for the Staten Island community. And last but definitely not least, Chester Finn. Chester is an individual and family advocate at the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, where he has advocated for people with developmental disabilities for more than 2 decades. Chester also serves on numerous state and national boards, advising on disability policy, and co-hosts the Accessing Life podcast with BJ.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Before we start the panel, I have a few things I would like to say. I'm wearing a button in honor of my mom, who was always my biggest cheerleader, my biggest fan, and I have to say she was right. I love you. Thank you. And to Chester, you've always been a great mentor. I love you, dude, and thank you for keeping me out of the trouble you tried to keep me out of. And thank you, Bernard, for leaving a legacy for all the advocates who came after you. And I'm proud to say that I'm a past president of Sandy's. Now, let's get right into the panel, the reason why we're here today. My first question is for Clarence. Clarence, can you tell us a little about how the consent judgment set us up for the future of inclusion?
Well, being a lawyer, the first thing I want to do is start with definitions so we all know what we're talking about. This morning we're talking about inclusion, and in my mind that embraces 4 principles. The first is simply being present. The second is participating. The third is belonging. And the fourth is being valued. So I think when you look at the Willowbrook consent decree, the goals in that decree were to provide the residents who were living at Willowbrook at the time with the least restrictive and most normal living conditions possible, and to move them from segregated to more integrated living and programming. For its time, the Willowbrook consent decree was a radical departure from the prevailing practices around the country of caring for developmentally disabled people. But the concept of inclusion, as we now understand it, was not widely understood or embraced during that period. Interestingly, the word inclusion doesn't appear anywhere in the Willowbrook consent decree and the many thousands of words that it embraces. In fact, most of the language in the consent decree and the early energy and focus was on improving the conditions in the institution for the several thousand people who were living there, hiring more professional and direct care staff, improving the physical plant, providing more programming and constructive activity, and the prohibition of the most abusive practices like restraint and seclusion, misuse of medications, and the misuse of aversives. So the consent decree didn't talk at all about inclusion. All of this is completely understandable when one considers the stark horror of the conditions in Willowbrook in the 1960s and 70s. I think just one statistic tells most of the story. There were over 6,000 residents at Willowbrook, and there were 59 nurses. The language of the consent decree that was used to describe the obligation of the state to class members talked about community placement rather than integration or inclusion, and it identified several different types of facilities and programs to be created: hostels, halfway houses, group homes, sheltered workshops, and day training programs, most of which are pretty segregated from normal society. The standard for moving class members to the community was, and I'm going to quote this, "Such placement will offer the individual better services and opportunity for personal development and a more suitable living environment than Willowbrook." That was a pretty low threshold. And honesty compels an acknowledgement that for much of the ensuing years, many of the residences created, people lived in smaller and undoubtedly better places, but they remained largely isolated from the communities in which we lived. We're talking about inclusion and the evolution of inclusion, which recognizes that expectations and conditions change over time. And the Willowbrook Consent Decree was a catalyst for many of the ensuing changes in policy that have occurred over the ensuing 50 years. A few examples. In 1978, the state decided to open up the community residences that were being developed under the Willowbrook consent judgment to people who were living with their families who could no longer care for them. This created an alternative so parents no longer had to face the horrible choice of either struggling themselves to maintain their loved ones in their family or institutionalizing them. In creating this opportunity, it also allowed the bonds of family and the support and advocacy that one receives to continue as people aged. The changes in policy that also required schools to provide a free and appropriate education to all children further supported the idea of keeping people with disabilities in the community and to help develop and nurture relationships and friendships that could enrich their lives into adulthood. I witnessed this and experienced it firsthand when a family which had a child with severe mental retardation, cerebral palsy, speech impediments, moved in next door. Noah was the same age as my son. They went to school together. They waited for the bus. In school, Noah attended some different classes, but he ate lunch and he had recess with all the rest of the kids. He developed friendships. He was invited to birthday parties in the neighborhood. Noah is a living example of inclusion because today, at the age of 44, he's living in the same community in a house that he shares with people that he got to know when he was in school. There were also other changes like the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was galvanized in large part by changing expectations of people across the country for what was possible for people with disabilities. The Fair Housing Amendments, the home and community-based waiver that provided money to support people in the community. All of these things managed to move us from institutionalization towards inclusion. We can pat ourselves on the back for all that's been accomplished after many years of legal and political advocacy by families, by lawyers, and their allies. But Will Rogers once said very prophetically, even if you are on the right track, if you just sit there, you will get run over. And I think that that lesson is particularly important at this point because things that evolve can just as easily devolve. And we are now living in a world with a Medicaid program that is the engine that has supported many of the reforms and possibilities that we see in community services for people with disabilities. They're being challenged and attacked. The federal programs that support attorneys who do advocacy on behalf of people with disabilities are on the chopping block. The Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice which was a very important champion in the litigation on Willowbrook and cases like this around the country, that whole division is being reoriented to a mission that nobody would recognize as being what civil rights is all about. And there's been an exodus of some of the best and brightest attorneys doing public interest law as a result. And law firms that used to be important allies in doing public interest litigation are being threatened with economic sanctions if they upset the ruling public order. All of this is to say that the victories that we think we've won don't stay won. We have to be vigilant, be ready to fight for them, and to be on constant alert, because the encroachments that have consigned people in the past to institutions like Willowbrook, the motivations for that are still with us. So I think the advocacy voices of everybody in this room is important. Willowbrook was important in setting us on the path, but we need to keep fighting for the policies that it has brought us to. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Clarence. Beth, the next question is for you. What do we want to make sure future generations don't forget about the lessons that Willowbrook taught us?
Well, picking up on Clarence's remarks, I want to point to the fact that we are at the most dangerous tipping point that I've ever experienced in my 30 years of working at the New York Civil Liberties Union and monitoring the entitlements of the class under both the consent judgment and the permanent injunction. We have a federal government that does not understand people with disabilities, that do not like people with disabilities, and do not want to support people with disabilities. The movement is being led by RFK Jr., to his shame, who wants to turn back the decades of progress that were started when his father went into Willowbrook, as you saw in the trailer, and revealed the snake pit conditions of the Willowbrook State School. We cannot go back, but I have to say that progress forward in ensuring the entitlements of the class has been very rocky over the years. It is tied almost exclusively to funding. We have deficits that we are facing, which have faced the state before, but we've never had an unwilling federal government acknowledging its obligation to provide assistance to people to live their fullest and best lives. The meanings of inclusion that we're here to talk about today, much progress has been made, but inclusion is not actually a reality when you have bigoted, biased, ableist, individuals who control the political landscape, who control the budget, who are able to object to people moving into communities. We have the Padovin law in New York State, which came out of Willowbrook, which allows the commissioner to override local opposition to the siting of a group home. That law is something that has fallen into disuse. We have routinely large-scale, loud opposition to people with disabilities living their lives in community as your next-door neighbors. We have to ensure that people understand that when you have a workforce that is not supported, that is not respected, that is not compensated, you will recreate the situations that led to Willowbrook, where you had understaffing, overpopulation, people with extreme needs whose needs could not be met. You dehumanize people with disabilities when you dehumanize the workforce, who supplement the aid of family members and friends and loved ones in helping people who need help to live their best lives in communities. You know, as Clarence noted, when you look at the consent judgment, it is an astonishing roadmap for the way to actually provide and recognize the humanity of individuals. They barred, forced labor because there were people at Willowbrook who were impressed into working for the state. They set out specifically how to feed people, what mealtime looks like. They banned prone feeding of individuals because people would choke and die. We're facing that situation currently, where there's insufficient staff to make sure that people can safely intake food and water. All of these items that you see in the consent judgment, which morphed into the permanent injunction in 1993, the injunction was entered in recognition of the fact that we were no longer looking at how to operate safely, protect people from harm in institutional settings. But the permanent injunction carried with it all of the obligations to ensure protection from harm, to avoid experimentation. I'm not sure how many people understand that most of the class members are hepatitis B carriers because they were experimented on, injected with live virus so that the military could develop a hepatitis B vaccine. That hepatitis B status has followed the class along through the days of HIV/AIDS, when Hep B was a marker for HIV/AIDS. It prohibited people from accessing medical services in medical facilities that are supposed to serve everyone because people with Hep B markers appear to be HIV carriers. And it leads to a diminished life expectancy with additional medical conditions, cancer, and the like, manifesting as people age. There is a bar against experimentation, but what we've heard recently with the creation of the autism registry in aid of research without people's consent really has the actual turning back of the clock to these bad days. So, you know, there are an awful lot of issues that I think we need to be very concerned about. Having the trailers, ensuring the workforce is trained on all of these items. This is a difficult job to support people on a 24/7 basis when there is insufficient oversight by supervisors, by quality assurance individuals for people who are living in congregate settings, in group homes, not in their own settings with family. If you don't have the oversight, things happen. Things happen, staff will defend each other, you will have an impenetrable barrier to understanding what takes place when incidents happen, as they inevitably do. So, you know, I think that the call is back to the ramparts. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. said that a revolution is not a one-time occurrence. It is ongoing dedication, vigilance to seek social justice, to seek meaningful change, and to ensure that that change, in fact, is durable. We are in a place where I think all of those thoughts, theories, the social justice movement is under extreme risk of being run right into the dark ages. Clarence mentioned the law firms, the public interest law firms, who are being, you know, disincentivized from participating in public interest law. The ACLU has been, with other not-for-profit entities, challenged in terms of IRS investigations, loss of tax-exempt status, investigations, and the like. All of this is ending up in a place where people are afraid to assert the rights of people, whether it's people, as Goody referred to this morning, who can't speak for themselves, or individuals, our loved ones and friends who are able to speak for themselves. People need to be seen, they need to be included, and we can't turn the clocks back.
Thank you, Beth. Hal, next question is for you. How has family advocacy influenced the trajectory of inclusion for people with developmental disabilities?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here today. Before I start talking a little bit about the judgment, I'd like to mention that in our audience is a gentleman who actually negotiated and helped write the consent judgment. His name is Peter Goldmark, and I hope, Peter, you're still here, and if you are, stand up. May have left? Don't know, I guess he left. But in any event, Peter was the director of the budget in 1975 under Governor Carey, and he had two hats to wear. One was to keep New York City out of bankruptcy, and the other to negotiate the Willowbrook consent judgment. And on both fronts, I think he did okay. The judgment. I actually haul around a copy of it, all 29 pages. It's a document that not only closed the Willowbrook State School, or set in motion to close the Willowbrook State School, but it's really a document of hope. It is in many respects like some of our founding documents. It's living and continues to live. I think the best way for me to talk about the problem or the issue or the question about the trajectory of advocacy and inclusion is to talk a little bit about myself and how it was that I became involved. Now, my daughter was born with a developmental disability in 1982. That was 7 years after the consent judgment. And frankly, for a period of time, I didn't really understand Willowbrook. I went to in 1999, the 50th anniversary of the ARC, New York City, AHRC, their celebration. And they had two speakers, Ralph Nader and Tom Coughlin. And we know Ralph Nader. He was a social activist, Unsafe at Any Speed, for those old enough to remember the book. And Tom Coughlin, who was the first commissioner of OPWDD and was actually the supervisor who helped close Willowbrook. Both of those gentlemen spoke at length about Willowbrook and the consent judgment, and they both spoke about parents' involvement and attorneys' involvement. And they spoke very highly of both of those. And I sat in the audience and I thought to myself, I'm a parent, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a resident of Staten Island, and I know very little about Willowbrook, and I know very little about the Willowbrook consent judgment. So I went home that night, and this was, I think, the internet was just taking off, but I pulled the Encyclopedia of New York City off the shelf, and I saw that April 30th, 1975 was the signing of the judgment. And of course, I did a bit of math, and I realized that therefore the 25th anniversary would be coming up. I reached out to some people in the disability community and said, what are you doing about some celebratory event? And there was nothing going on. So I took it upon myself to reach out, and before I knew it, I was co-chairing a celebration which we held here. But what I also did is that I started to read a little bit, and of course I went to the Bible, the Willowbrook Wars, which is a great book, and I went to the Staten Island Advance articles by Jane Curtin, and then I went out and I got the judgment. And I sat down, made a copy, and sat at my dining room table and started to read the judgment. And anyone who does read it will come to realize what an important and moving document this is. It's set out in 29 pages, and as Beth was mentioning and Clarence has mentioned, went through every sort of aspect of the person's life who was living at Willowbrook at the time. It addressed all of the issues. It addressed residential living. It addressed the environment. It addressed education, as Clarence had noted, and the language in it. You know, education, this is the way the consent judgment read. The education philosophy shall be that all residents are presumed to be capable of benefiting from education. What a profound statement. And of course, some of us will look at that and say, profound? That's a silly statement. Of course, that's what we think of education. But the drafters of the consent judgment, they realized that they needed to put that in to make sure that everybody got it. The food and nutrition services, as Beth was mentioning, here's the language. Consistent with their capabilities and handicaps, residents shall be taught to feed themselves and shall be fed both hot and cold foods and beverages in a normal fashion. Meal schedules shall correspond to normal community standards with no less than 30 to 40 minutes allotted for each resident's meal. And you know why that was in there? Because they weren't being fed that way. They were being fed in very, very short increments. It also says that residents shall be given liquids at appropriate intervals during each meal, not just at the end of the meal. It goes on and on. Dental services. Painkillers normally associated with dental work shall be administered when needed. Think about that one. The judgment, though, at the very beginning said stuff that I'm going to read, which is obviously as relevant today as it was in 1975, and hopefully will be always continued relevant. This is what it says. The steps, standards, and procedures are not optimal, nor ideal standards, nor are they custodial standards. They are based on the recognition that retarded persons, regardless of the degree of handicapping conditions, are capable of physical, intellectual, emotional, and social growth, and upon the further recognition that a certain level of affirmative intervention and programming is necessary if that capacity for growth and development is to be preserved and regression prevented. That is what was needed to be said then and what needs to be continued to be said. When we talk about the trajectory of inclusion and where family members come involved, family members have been the most important part of this program. Sure, we've had tremendous lawyers, we've had tremendous staff, we've had tremendous government workers. The very notion, of course, of OPWDD, which earlier on was called OMRDD, that's a product of the Willowbrook consent judgment. It was a movement that was going on. It was necessary to bring government in to its own department to oversee the developmentally disabled, to help develop and build community residences. But families are the ones that push that. The plaintiffs in this suit, along with individuals, are the ARCs of New York State. At the time, there were probably 60-some chapters, but there were 62 counties in New York, and each one of them was overseen by a chapter of the ARC. Those ARCs were created by family members, and those ARCs continue today. When we talk about trajectory and we talk about advocacy, and both Clarence and Beth have really hit upon this point, we can't let go. We have to continue to push and continue to bring up the notion of the Willowbrooks because it's important, and to continue to remind our legislators and policymakers that what we did 75 years ago is as relevant today as then and will continue to be. We need to push, push, push. And when you look and you think of how the system works, it works because people are prodded a little bit. That is a fact. And they can be prodded by the Willowbrook consent judgment. I think Geraldo also brought up the same idea. We can't forget and we can't go back. So when I think of Willowbrook, I think, Robert Kennedy came out here in 1965. The editor of our local newspaper here, many of you people know Brian Laylon and I were having a short discussion, and on the poster out there talks about Robert Kennedy coming out and calling this a snake pit. Like, what happened? How come we didn't close this place down in 1965, that it took 10 years to do it? Well, it took 10 years. Those 10 years, the parents really began to organize and pull themselves together. So I look at New York State, I look at what we've done, I look at the parent advocacy is just so terribly important. I look at what the lawyers have done, which is very, very important, and I look at what our public officials have done, and especially OPWDD, to keep this up. And I think of myself, I think of my daughter. My daughter is in a community residence, which is about a half a mile from here. In fact, you can go out on her front steps, and you look over, and you see the tower at the College of Staten Island. That used to be the tower at Willowbrook. And as I said, it's about a half a mile away the crow flies. But if you were to measure that in the distance that New York State has moved from 1975 to today, well, it would take light years. That would be measured only in light years. So we have gone so far, but we need to go further. And my final comment here is that families that are there, parents, siblings, get out there and keep pushing, and reminding everyone of the days of Willowbrook, but how far we've been able to move because of the Willowbrook consent judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Chester, this next question is for you. How did Willowbrook influence self-advocacy for current and future generations, and what would be your advice for future generations of self-advocacy? I can only imagine what you're going to say, so let everybody hear it.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all the panelists and your views, and most of all, I'd like to thank you, BJ, for helping make advocacy in this state possible, but also where we want to go in the future. And thanks to OPWDD, Willow, the governor's office, the Division of Budget, for helping us to move forward. But before I say that, is that I'd like to tell self-advocates that in order to make change, you have to do things yourself. I tell them, I can retire whenever I want to, get tired, sit in my house, put my feet up on the couch, and watch Oprah. But now...
I'll pretend I didn't hear you say that.
But now possible, I'm not putting my feet up on the couch. I am marching in that army of advocates, family members, and agencies to keep going on what we need and let people know who we are. We have a saying in self-advocacy, nothing about us without us. That should be a motto for all of us, because we should not let money stop us from being the people that we want to be. We should not let that stop us from obtaining our goals, because right now we're sitting in Willowbrook, but we had people like Bernard. We had people like all of the people here to make that happen. We had Geraldo to show the nation that this was happening and it wasn't good. And we had people like Mrs. Goodman to say, I'm not going to take it. We're not going to take it. Families said they wasn't going to take it. So why should now, today, we sit down and say, oh, look what's happening on our TV. We can't do nothing about it. It's the motto that's been around in this country forever. We, the people. Are we the people to make things happen and make change? Are we the people to do like me and sit on the couch and put our feet up and watch social media go by? No, we're not. Because we're here to make a difference. Every day I go to work, I get phone calls, I talk to parents, and I question myself, am I doing enough to make change? And from the things that's happening now in this country, I tell myself, self, you're not doing enough. You gotta do more. You gotta fight longer, and you can't give up. Because I remember when I was a little boy in my grandmother's house, sitting on the floor in Alabama, watching black and white TV. Yes, we had those at that time. And I saw this man talking about freedom, talking about a dream. And it was Martin Luther King. I never got a chance to meet him, but I got to network and become a friend of his son, Martin Luther King III. And he said to me, how are you going to make your community know who you are and what you want, and how are you going to carry that message? And I think that all of us in this state carries the message, but how far do we carry it? Do we carry it enough to where we can fight that battle, or do we say, oh, I've done enough, I can sit down now. You never can sit down, we can never stop. And it's our job to make sure that it doesn't happen anymore, because Willowbrook got turned into a college, but people's lives are still there. There are people, there are friends of mine that I know that are worried about returning to a place like this. And what you see going on in the country now are scaring people to the point to they think that this might happen. And then we have states that it is happening. But what are we going to do about it? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? Are we going to watch social media go by and say, this is what's happening? You can't do too much about it because it's the government and it's money. You know what? You know what they say about money? Anybody. Money is the root of all evil. So money is evil. So it shouldn't take evil to change a life. It shouldn't take evil to get people out of institutions. Money don't do it, people do. We do. We can make the changes. We can make the nation what we want it to be. And what I was thanking BJ for before is we had, I've worked for OPW 26 years, and that doesn't mean I'm done. I always say I'm done when they put the dirt over me, and so I'm not expecting that no time soon. But what we worked on is getting OPW to understand, if I can be here for over 26 years, BJ can be here for over 23 or so, we can pass that message on and get OPW to hire other people. We can help train other people to do what we do, to advocate like parents, like agencies, like DSPs, to make a change in New York State and not wait for somebody else to do it. So that's why we have advocacy peer support unit at OPW, where we're hiring people with disabilities. And my hope is that we don't stop with the few people that we have already, but we open the doors and welcome more people, because like you heard from Kim from the governor's office, and when she came to our office, they have more people that they've hired to help move the disability movement forward. And the more people we have, the better it is, and the more changes that we can make. Don't just say it, do it, because advocacy is still alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chester. And before I ask the next question, I just want to follow up on what you said. You know what fear creates? Fear creates silence, and silence creates no action. This is our opportunity now and in the future to continue to take action. Nobody's telling you not to be afraid of what's going on, because there's a lot of stuff going on in today's world, and it's a lot coming at us all at once. But if you let the fear stop you from being who you are, then you're not being who you are. You're not being the voices you need to be to create change. It's up to all of us to create the change. Thank you. Now, Erik, we ran into each other this morning, and I promised you, because we're friends, I'd be nice to you, and I'm going to keep that promise.
Thank you.
So here is your question. What challenges do we face in achieving full inclusion of people with developmental disabilities?
Okay, well, BJ, thank you for the question. And I'm going to kind of give the provider perspective on the panel. The short and, I guess, easy answer to the question is two things that are very closely related: staffing and funding. That's the easy answer. The thing that's harder to answer is why. Why are those things happening? And I'll get back to that. Before I get into my comments, though, I do want to acknowledge this administration, the governor, our partners at OPWDD. As the commissioner said earlier today, over the last 4 years, we have received significant investment into our system. It has helped immensely. And we thank them, especially this last year where there was a significant bump in the rates that we receive for services. Extremely, extremely helpful. But as we sit here today, we realize we still don't have an answer on what the outcome of the budget's going to be. As the other panelists have mentioned, not only are we dealing with uncertainty at the state level, we're also dealing with a lot of uncertainty at the federal level with threats like we've really never seen them before. And while we appreciate the incredible investments that have been made by this administration, we also have to recognize that prior to this period, we went 10 years without a single cent coming into our field, and we took a giant step back. 2 decades ago, the average DSP made twice minimum wage. Today, the average DSP makes just over minimum wage. Here's some startling, even with the investment that we receive, here's some startling data points that I want to share with you. Right now, in our field, 1 in 5 DSP positions is vacant. 1 in 3 positions turns over every year. So we can't get enough people in our doors, and when we get them, we can't keep them. The starting wage right now, even with all the investment that's been made, is still about $20 or less in some instances. That's not a living wage in today's environment. And what's the real impact of all of this? Well, the real impact, of course, is something that we studied a few years ago when we commissioned a study with the University of Miami of Ohio, that 50% of our DSP workforce is food insecure, and 50% of our DSP workforce is housing insecure. Think about that for a second. The very people that we are asking to care for our loved ones and provide them basic needs don't know if their own basic needs are going to be met the next meal or that night when they lay their head down on a pillow. Okay. Staffing is critical to integration and inclusion. Without full staffing, without a skilled workforce, without an engaged workforce, we don't have consistency in care, and we don't have the ability to support people with disabilities to be fully integrated into the broader community. Now, I was talking with Clarence, actually, earlier this week on one of the calls for planning this event, and he made a comment about the difference between integration and inclusion. And I think it's important to discuss those things. Willowbrook resulted in integration. So we closed a giant institution and we opened smaller residences and programs in the community. Wonderful, great. But that's not true inclusion. True inclusion, in some ways I think you could say that our people are still isolated. They're just in smaller programs in the community, but are they really a part of the community? And that's where I think that fourth principle that you mentioned about inclusion comes into play, about valuing people with disabilities. And I don't have to speak to anyone in this room because we all get it. But I think, each year that we have to come back and fight for pennies to maintain our wages and to pay our workforce a living wage says that they don't quite get it. And that's our challenge, I think, as family advocates, as providers, as people with disabilities, is to try to close that gap, move from integration, which we've made incredible progress at, but we haven't achieved full inclusion. And that's what the path forward is going to be focused on, and I hope all of you will partner with me in getting to that point. It's going to take some work. Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. Jason, this question is for you. What would you like to see the world look like for the future of developmental disability services?
Thank you. Thank you, BJ, and thank you to all the fellow panelists. It's been very insightful. I would also like to just thank everyone who's attending today, OPWDD, and I'm honored and humbled to be the representative of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council. When thinking about the future, we must always consider the past. On this historic day of the 50th anniversary of the Willowbrook consent decree, we must acknowledge the deplorable conditions which led to the decree. As Winston Churchill once said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We've grown leaps and bounds since 1975, but there is so much more to go. I'm going to piggyback off what Erik said, and I'd like to lead with the direct support professional, the heart of all of the voluntary organizations and state-operated providers. Our direct support professionals are not making a livable wage. I look forward to the day when a direct support professional can clock in, work a 40-hour week, and be able to support their family and loved ones. That doesn't exist right now. The direct support professionals are either working double shifts daily or clocking out from one agency to just go to their second job and clock in and do the same thing all over again, and that's just to make ends meet. For all of you that work in this field, and in speaking to Bernard earlier today, he was telling me that we need to advocate stronger for our direct support professionals. He knows firsthand that those are the people that provide him the support to live a fulfilling life. So when I think about the future, the first area that we have to really prioritize, and we've made a lot of strides. The COLA has been in the budget for the last few years, but we need an increased COLA. We need more. We need bonuses. We need to legitimize and professionalize the direct support professional. Speaking of funding, agencies need more support. Yes, there has been an increase in some rates, but there are still many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that aren't able to access services, that can't get into a day program, that can't get into a respite program, that need staff for community rehabilitation. Reason being is, one, we don't have staff. Two, we don't have the means, the supports, and the resources to provide supports for people with complex medical and behavioral needs. There's a disparity amongst people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's very unfortunate. Speaking to family members all the time at the council, expressing their frustration that they can't access services because agencies can't help them because they just don't have the funding for enhanced staffing or the resources or trainings available to support their loved ones. We have individuals, which is great now, that are living to a long age. There's been a lot of medical developments, and thankfully the lifespan has increased significantly. But with that being said, how are we supporting individuals when they age? Are we able to support them in their homes? Are we able to make revisions to their environment to make it more functional and supportive? It's challenging. We've made a lot of strides in continued inclusivity and embracing the community. I think today's a perfect example. When you walk out the doors today or during break or in the beginning of registration, there were 3 agencies that were represented. A Very Special Place, On Your Mark and Lifestyles, and individuals that were there working and that made the food and serving the food and had that ability to be inclusive and be out there and represent. It was beautiful to watch that. 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. We have made many strides. The community is more accepting of this population, but we need to continue to get rid of that stigma. That's always going to be a constant struggle. But we have made strides, and we need to continue to do so, and I think we have. Increased understanding and awareness of the particular needs of the IDD community in the medical field. Our individuals deserve medical care just as much as any neurotypical people do. When they're in hospitals, we need doctors to be understanding and accommodations to be made for people that may need extra support. We have individuals that are in the hospital, in the emergency room, waiting for beds for days that struggle. And that can't be. When individuals are in doctor's appointment, they need access to different services and therapies. That needs to continue to be available in the future. And opportunities for more residential programs. Unfortunately, there are thousands of people waiting for residential placement. Families don't have the ability, most families don't have the ability to watch their loved one transition into a group home, to be part of that process, help them integrate into the community, into a congregate care setting. It's really done on a priority basis right now. It's an emergency need that is being prioritized. and that doesn't allow family members to be part of the process. There is a huge need for residential placement. It is scary to have a loved one and at home with you and you are unable to care for them and not know what's going to happen to them when you're no longer here. With that being said, today we're celebrating, and we have made so many strides in the last 50 years, and I'm confident by looking around the room and amongst many other community leaders and legislators and the leadership of OPWDD, we will continue to do that and get there. We sit here today with pride and progress of what we made, but we must continue to move forward and transform our field and protect the dignity and rights of the people we support for the next 50 years and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I want to tell one really quick story, if I might, how advocacy never stops. Last night, arrived here, had dinner with my unit, and something wasn't here when I needed it to make sure that I could sleep in the bed before coming here today. And I said, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. But my team is a very active team, and we are a family. They stepped up, were making phone calls, and wouldn't give up until I got the equipment I needed. So this is a reminder to us all. No matter what we advocate for, we all need to come together and remember we have a common goal just to advocate, speak up, speak out. We are a family. Families, agencies, and self-advocates. Do we want to take, are we taking questions now, or are we just continuing?
I think we're just continuing with the program.
Got it.
Thank you. Such an important conversation to be having, and I hope it's the first of many to help shape the future for people with developmental disabilities. Now I would like to invite someone who's been a tremendous partner to the College of Staten Island through the creation of the Willowbrook Mile. Her tenacity and the tenacity of the entire Willowbrook Mile Planning Committee has provided us with a timeline here on the college campus to help everyone remember what happened on this property so many years ago. This permanent reminder is a place for people to learn about history so they will never repeat mistakes of the past. Diane Buglioli is the co-founder and board member of a very special place here in Staten Island, and also one of today's caterers. We have Diane to thank for the refreshments today, since she coordinated amongst all three agencies. Diane is also a former recreational aide for Willowbrook State School. Diane?
Thank you. It's afternoon, so I won't say good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for the kind introduction. At this point in my life, I know that truly good achievements are never accomplished alone, but through the efforts of many. I shared recognition of the mile with all those who made the Willowbrook Mile a reality. Before I go on, I just want to acknowledge there are two parents who were original parents working with Willie, and that's Jerry Isaacs, who's standing up right now, and Ann Nermeyer, who's walking out the door. Ann is another parent. These are these powerful advocates whose shoulders we stand on. There they are. And Murray Schneps's daughters are here. If they're still here, they can give a little wave out. I'm not sure. They may have left. Are they here? Yeah. And before I go on, how about that breakfast, right? You know, there is a certain joy about this day. The three agencies whose participants provided and served that wonderful breakfast came into existence as a result of the Willowbrook consent decree. The communitization of services and supports mandated by that decree opened tens of thousands of opportunities. So to AVSP, Lifestyles, and On Your Mark Cafes, thank you and job well done. Congrats as well to the Lifestyles Media Project, who is covering today's event. And thank you for this CSI hospitality staff who worked together with the three cafe staff as a true catering community to make this happening so successful. This is a wonderful manifestation of the impact of the decree. It's just great. You know, this day honors the 50th anniversary of the consent decree that declared the righteousness in moving our society from seclusion to inclusion. It set a standard below which we as a society should never again fall. The Willowbrook Mile grew from the realization of that fear, the possibility of going backwards if we fail to learn and remember the lesson. On the mile's journey, we learned many things, including that it is not enough to be an advocate, to support the right thing. Like Goodman and Carabello, we must be activists, committed to take action, to be the change we know to be the right path, and to continue against all odds. Thank you, Goody, and thank you, Bernard. In the early 90s, with deinstitutionalization process strongly in place, the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council began looking at the development of needed services on the remaining Willowbrook campus. There were meetings, surveys, and refined plans to develop needed services. Issues occurred, and it became clear that some of the property was unbuildable and that funding for such services was not doable. After much discussion, it was decided that the most important objective we could achieve would be ensuring that the lessons from Willowbrook would not be lost as time marched on. We owed the next generation a clear message. We have learned a costly lesson. Willowbrook, the institution as a grouping of overcrowded large brick buildings, or Willowbrook as a concept in which people are denied the right to thrive, should never happen again. And we searched for a way to present the facts, the emotions, and the incredible perfect storm of activists, media, and the legal system that ensued and its impact. The concept of path evolved, and when the Staten Island Council and CSI joined resources, the development of a walking trail with informational stopping points on the former Willowbrook campus became our goal. The mile would have 12 stations, each detailing to visitors the complex history of this property, its inhumanity, the power of activism, its explosive expose, and finally, its efforts for its path to drastically change. And how exciting to have the first station, which is located at the library, now add to its collection the ARC archival treasure chest. Erik. The completed Willowbrook Mile is an enduring, respectful, and truthful presence that can fuel the present to ever repair the flagrant weaknesses of the past. We know that Willowbrook State School's initial intent was good, to help provide a non-existent resource. However, loss of funding, lack of staff, and loss of transparency and focus began the tragic fall to its eventual failure. The present service environment may not appear as troubled compared to the past, but today's distressing trends in funding and the staffing crisis alert us that the need for activism is as necessary now as it was then. We have already learned this lesson. We know better. We must take focused action to protect the future from harm to another generation. Finally, we cannot address the decree or the mile without speaking to the class members of the Willowbrook judgment. We hope that we have been successful in infusing this mile with our respect for those of you who suffered through this experience. You are indeed owed deep apologies for the past, but only honor for your present value as people in our society. This world benefits greatly by you being in it and was greatly lessened when you were not. If you have not visited the mile table, please do so in the hallway outside this theater. We have set up facsimiles of the mile stations. We have brochures and can answer questions or prepare you for a self-guided tour or assist you in joining the scheduled one-ish guided tour. Not only walk this mile here on this property, but also take meaningful steps in your everyday lives. Reflect on what you learn and take action to strive to support efforts to achieve and sustain social justice for all people. Always moving forward, never back. That is the purpose of the mile, ever alerting us to a better path, a better choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. All right, the part of the day where we talk at you has ended. We encourage folks who want to stay and see the entire Willowbrook documentary to stay here, where we will start that documentary shortly. If you'd like to go walk the Willowbrook Mile, self-guided or with a tour guide, please make your way out towards the front. On behalf of the College of Staten Island, the Office of the Governor, OPWDD, thank you so much for coming and being a part of this event today. We have learned so much from our past, and we need to continue to learn from our present as we move to the future. You want to add something?
Thank you all. I very much appreciate hosting you today and learning about the stories that have impacted so many of us.
Great. Be well, everybody.